Hello, everyone, and welcome back to History Roadshow. Today, we have an extraordinary treat in store for all history enthusiasts out there. I am thrilled and honoured to be joined by a distinguished historian whose expertise and passion for the past have captivated audiences worldwide. Dr. Paranque is an accomplished historian, author, and academic. Her extensive research and insightful analysis have shed light on crucial historical moments and brought new perspectives to the forefront. Beyond her impressive academic achievements, Dr. Paranque is known for her engaging and accessible approach to history, making the past come alive for audiences of all backgrounds. Her work has been featured in various prestige publications, and she has been a sought-after speaker at conferences and events. So please welcome to the channel, Dr. Estelle Paranque. So thanks for joining me today, Estelle. How are you?
Thank you for having me, John. I'm very good. I'm very glad to do this interview with you for our second collaboration.
This is probably going to be the most challenging interview you've ever had. It probably is. I mean, I know you've done TV work and stuff, but I mean, facing me, it's like Piers Morgan of history, isn't it? Well, not quite. Not quite Piers Morgan.
We'll see, I guess.
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
Anyway, it's great to have you on the show today. So let me start by asking you a question. So can you tell us about your background and what made you become an historian?
Right. Yeah. Well, I've always loved history. It's, you know, when I really think about my childhood, it's the first thing that I really loved and the things that I really wanted to do. So for me, it became like just kind of obvious that it was something I wanted to pursue. But my father was not really keen on me doing history, and he even said, like, what are you going to be, a historian? And he laughed. So we made a deal that I would learn English. So I would go to university to do English studies. And because he thought that English was really important, and I think in many ways he's right, especially when you're French like me, and if you want to write, you know, for a general audience, and if you want to make it, I think doing it in English is where you're going to have a bigger audience. So I'm kind of very grateful to him just for that. And so I did English studies, but English studies, you know, you have language, you have translation, you have English literature, American literature, but you also have obviously English and American history. And I just fell in love with English history completely. And so each time, you know, I was progressing at uni, I was specializing more and more in history. And then my dad realized that I really had a passion for history. And obviously my passion was really kind of shone through my love for Elizabeth I. I did my BA dissertation on Elizabeth I. I did my 2 MA dissertations on Elizabeth I. And I did my PhD on Elizabeth I. So like the love was strong, I have to say. And yes, it's what happened. And then I realized that obviously my English was not, I was not bilingual at the time. I was just, you know, studying English at university. And I realized that I really needed to kind of, if I really wanted to make it in my head, you know, as a real historian, I had to go basically to England. And it's what I did. I left everything. I was 23. I got my first job at Queen Mary University as a French language assistant. And then I built up and I started my PhD and I worked my way through. And and then I became a historian and, you know, university lecturer, assistant professor for the US viewers that were watching this interview.
You've just got your thumb, I think, in too many pies, haven't you, really? That's what it is. So I think you've already answered this one, but what would you say is your expertise within history? And what particular era or topic do you focus on? And I'm guessing you're going to say Elizabeth.
Well, my first, obviously, area of expertise is definitely Elizabeth I, the Tudors in more general. But actually, it's more complicated than that because I obviously also do French history a lot. I'm, you know, an expert on Catherine de' Medici, on the last French Valois kings. I'm an expert on their queen consorts. I'm an expert on their royal mistresses, so really the French court. And then even more general than that, I teach a lot on women history. I teach a lot on cross-cultural encounters. I'm very interested in the formation of empires. I did very many different courses as well. But I guess in terms of publications, if you really look at my list of publications, it would be Tudor history, women history, and French history in terms of areas of expertise.
That's really cool. Um, what do you think makes an era or an historical event that you've studied in the past kind of relevant to modern audiences?
I think it's the human side that makes things relevant for our society today. Like, I think that is the fact that we have to remember that everything that happened in the past, um, there were human beings with the same emotions as we do today.
Yeah,
And I think that's,
it certainly has a knock-on effect.
yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think it does. I think it's something really like where you feel, I feel a strong connection with past people, because once you look at their personal letters or when you look at the manuscripts, and you can feel their kind of the way they were reacting to things, the way they were feeling. So I think when we look at history, it's not just about facts and dates, it's also the human experience as a whole.
Do you think that your research and understanding of history has shed light on current societal issues or challenges?
Oh, definitely, especially when I work on women history, female leaders. I'm absolutely fascinated by female leaders, and not just the queens. I mean, obviously the queens were. It's the easiest way in many ways because you have their words. It's easier to analyze that. But when you look, and you do that as well on your channel, you're very interested in like the women who are a bit forgotten, and I am too. I think that's where also like we connect so much. Is like we love this hidden histories, these forgotten figures. But again, it's also about like learning about how women, navigated all these power struggles, and it's still very relevant today. I mean, even today we're having a hard time having female leaders. I mean, it's not unheard of, obviously,
No.
but it's not something that we are used to. It's not something, and when you look at the 16th century, I always take that examples, but Isabel of Castile, you have Margaret of Austria, Elizabeth I, Mary Stuart, you have Catherine of Medici, all these female in power at the same time. Marie de Guise, and it's so brilliant to see. Even like the ones, that became regent when the kings go to war, like so Catherine Parr, Catherine of Aragon, Margaret of Scotland, like there's lots of women who were so, even in many ways, we can learn how much more powerful they were back then. In a society that was more patriarchal, it's very interesting, I think.
I think that the stories of women of the past are so much more fascinating than the men, because I don't think men have changed since Adam. Men are here for one reason, and that seems to be the overriding thing of all men in power in history. Even looking at Henry VIII, it's just like, let's go to another one. But the women who were really in the background on most of these stories the stories are just amazing. Regardless, they're just absolutely amazing. I was just going to ask you as well, can you share some insights into your research process? I mean, how do you analyze historical sources and then kind of piece together the past?
Well, that's a very good question. Well, first of all, like the first thing I do is that obviously I've been taught to do it, I train to do it, but you have to let the sources talk to you. So usually you have an idea of a topic that you're interested in. So I don't know, you might be interested in the youth of Elizabeth I, or, Margaret Tudor and our times in Scotland. So the things you do, like you obviously have a timeline of a period of years that you would like to look at. And then it's a question of going to the archives, asking for the letters. And hear me out when I said it, you read through the letters, but you have different types. You're going to have to edit this. You have different steps of reading things. Like the first reading is just about to familiarize yourself with the source. The second step is like, okay, now you know what is the source about, and what is it really telling you? The third step is going to be, can I confront that source to other sources I've read? So you take notes and everything. And then it starts shaping into, and it depends if you're doing academic history or public history. When you do academic history, you have to have a question behind it. What does it show about female power? What does it show about Elizabeth's authority? What does it show about Margaret's authority? And then you try to have like recurrent themes, and then you analyze the words that are written, but also their significance in a wider, broader context. And when you do public history, you do that as well. At the same time, your aim is to try to bring back to life these words. So the kind of the process is a bit different. You're less analytical. You're more trying to bring back to life these words, to bring back to life these lives. So your audience is going to read your book can feel completely immersed in the past and in the lives of these people. It's what I try to do with my book, Blood, Fire, and Gold, and what I'm trying to do with my next book as well, where you're really like immersed in their words. And so the research project always comes to going back to the source, going back to the words, and take it from there, really.
I'm quite naive when it comes to resources and sources and things like that, because obviously I don't get the access that probably you do. But with some of these letters and transcripts from 500 years ago, have they been kind of digitized or modernized, like into a modern language, translated sort of? Because obviously the language back then is totally different to what it is today.
So it depends, John. So you have, that's why, like, when you do like a degree, like I've done, like you are taught to do paleography and you're taught to learn, Old English, Old French. And the more you read and the more you do that, then it becomes like another language. It becomes part of, yeah, it's like normal, today English or today French for you. But at the same time, there are some works that have, transcribed, so the manuscripts, and then changed the spelling, modernized a bit to make it more accessible. So you have books, for example, you have Elizabeth I collected works. So you have all her speeches. You don't have all her letters, but you have a good selection of letters. You have her poems, you have her prayers, and all of this stems from manuscripts. So there's the source, like saying, you can find it at Oxford, Baldwin Library, or you can British Library or whatever. It tells you where you can find it if you want to see the manuscript. But here you have it printed. Now, in terms of digitized source, it's a very good question. The French Bibliothèque Nationale de France has a very good digitized. Are you there? Yeah. The French National Bibliothèque Nationale de France has a very good digitized manuscripts online that you can have access to. So you don't even have to go there if you know already what you want to look at. The British Library as well is really developing their catalogue. But then you will need the skills to read manuscripts.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And I just think it's interesting for the people watching this to try and understand the types of things you have to put yourself through. Regarding challenges, what do you think challenges you face as an historian today, and how do you overcome them? Is there anything when you're doing this research that you think, I just need a little bit of information, but it's A, B, or C, and it's really difficult?
Well, exactly as you said, like John, just like some of the sources are lost. They're either lost or misplaced. So I think it's what's difficult. It's like the lost. We call them the lost letters of Mary Stuart. We knew, like, they've been decoded by this amazing team. I'm actually working with them, and they're brilliant. They're a brilliant team of scientists, but they're not historian, right? So they're working with some historians to try to make sense of the letters. Though I have to say they did a great job in the first place, but. Here we call them the lost letters. Though 50 years ago, John Bossy, one of the biggest historians, British historians of all time, has already wrote that he knew that there were like about 50, 60 letters. I don't know if he was very specific, but he knew that letters were missing. And he didn't know if they were lost or misplaced, or, it turned out that they were ciphered So, and there was no way of knowing where they were. And this team of researchers found them in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, decoded them, and realized it was Mary Stuart writing to the French ambassador. It's mind blowing.
It is, yeah.
But here, that's one of the biggest challenges. Like, we think sometimes that a source is lost, it might be misplaced, it might be ciphered, and the historians don't always have the possibility to decipher them. You know what I mean? Like, it's where you see that you need different skills and you need different people to work on projects, that's why I love working with them, because like it's really an interdisciplinary team. But yeah, so I think that's the biggest frustration is like when you work on 16th century or even, before, like medieval history, you are limited in many ways by the sources. And I think when you're a historian that look at more modern sources, when I talk to my friends who are modern historians, their premise is that they have too many sources and they're like overwhelmed by the amount of information. And so again, it's a relationship with the sources. It's not being afraid of going through. I went through thousands and thousands of letters, And
again, I guess you have to collate those. There are sources, but you have to collate them and put them into some sort of order, because it must become really confusing.
At some point you just get to, so well a period that I don't know how to explain it, just falls into place. Like, it just, for example, when I did my book about Elizabeth through Valois eyes, so with the French kings, there were so many letters, but I just got so accustomed to these letters. I almost knew the dates. Like, I knew where to find the information. It was during my PhD, but it became such an intense kind of experience where I even remember telling my parents I felt like Henry III of France and Elizabeth I of England are my best friends, and they thought it was a bit sad for me, but because they're dead. But you see, you get so immersed in these letters that you have the timeline in your head, and you need good organization skills, that you do.
What lessons do you think we can learn from studying history, and how can they be applied to the present and the future when interpreting events or historical figures?
Well, first, there's a few things. Like, when you learn about history, it helps you, I think, understand your present and to kind of think about the future, because it's not that I really believe that history repeats itself word for word, but there are recurring themes in history. Like, if you look at the fall of the Roman Empire, you look at the fall of the British Empire, the French Empire, there's a recurring theme where people at some point who are exploited are going to, fight back. There are recurring themes about women of power taking power and, doing extraordinary things or being absolutely horrendous. You never know, it depends on which women you're looking at. But so I think that by learning history, you can understand more why we are in that society today. Not just our Western societies, but, in the world societies, and why we came to that. And you can even have a glance to the future in terms of like, well, I know in the past that was happened after that type of event. So we have to be careful here. For example, we know that when there's a very bad economy, it can lead to very horrendous times. Like if people feel completely left, they have nothing left to lose, or you need a scapegoat. There are these recurring themes. And I think by learning history, you have to be aware of that. Now, I also think that by learning history in itself, it gives you important skills like critical thinking, analytical thinking. It gives you things like where you question your sources. It's not just about reading the sources from the past and take them as face value. It's about reflecting on them. So I like history for that, and I think it's a very important topic to study at school, at university. I think it gives the best thinkers, obviously, or one of the best thinkers, And so, and I think it complements lots of other skills you can acquire with other topics and subjects.
I get, obviously, quite a lot of comments on certain characters that I've covered in history. And I'm interested to know what advice you would give to the people watching this who encounter conflicting historical narratives. because everybody seems to know. You always get people that say, this is the right way. Then somebody else say, no, this is the right way. And somebody else. So how do you approach that type of comment? Because I'm sure you're going to start getting them yourself.
Well, I think there's no right way. It depends on what you read, right? I
Mm.
mean, if you read one biography of Elizabeth I, you might disagree with me on lots of things. You might tell me, depending on which biography you would have chosen, but if you've read 10 biographies, you're less likely to kind of disagree with me because you would understand that what I'm trying to do is to add layers to the knowledge we have. So I think the people who love like commenting and criticizing, saying, no, it's not true, what you've said is not true, they kind of miss the point. Let's take an example that is really vivid in my mind. It's something I always discuss with people about Mary Queen of Scots accent, French or Scottish.
Yeah, well,
Or,
I've had that myself. Yeah.
well, it's a very complex one. You have people, I believe she had a French accent, like there's no doubt about this, but actually we have sources, English sources of English ambassadors saying that when she speaks English, when she spoke English, there was a hint of Scottish accent,
Mm.
right? But then her French was absolutely perfect. You see, I mean, I think it's more complex than what the person who was meeting her reflected on her. Do you see, I mean, like what he was hearing, or if there's a hint of Scottish, there's a hint of Scottish.
Mm.
But do you see what I mean? So it's a more complex question about just having a French accent, just having a Scottish accent or English accent. Accents were different, languages were different, and let's not forget that these people were multilingual, but not just bilingual. Like they
Yeah.
spoke different languages, and they were very good at it. Mary Stuart is one of them. Elizabeth I is another one who was very good at them. So, and I think they were not that bothered about accents because, in many ways, it was a much more open world when you think about it. People travel less, but the people who were traveling were the ones who were probably, the most wealthy, and so they did learn other
And there was
languages.
and there was no Google.
And there was no Google.
So,
Yeah.
they just had to do what they did.
Yeah.
I think we've covered this a little bit, but I will ask you it again. So the technology that you've obviously got to hand today, such as digital archives, data analysis tools, have they changed the landscape for yourself with regards to research?
Oh, completely. When I started, it was much more. You had a very strong need to go to the archives and even take notes. You were not allowed, with your iPhone, or you could not take photos. And then when I was during my PhD, it changed. The rule changed, and you could just go to archives and take photos, and it saved a huge amount of time because you could go through so many more manuscripts before you had to take by hand with the pencil and a pad
Mm.
and write down what you were reading. It would take hours and days and weeks and months to just go through research. Now you take pictures, you go home, you put them through your computer, you type. It goes much quicker. So the technology is definitely here to help, I think, historians being more efficient.
I was just going to say, are there any kind of potential drawbacks to relying on or relying too heavily on it on technology? Because with Google, you just type a name in and you just get a plethora of information today. So it may not all be great stuff that you're looking at. So that do you have a problem with like being totally in charge of that kind of technology
Yeah, no,
side
you're
of
right,
things?
John. You have to be careful. You have to look at the websites. You have to look at the sources. Not everything, is equal in terms of quality of what you read on the internet. So that's a very good point to make. You have to be a bit careful, and you have to go through many websites to realize that some of them are not very good, well made. You have to look at the reputation of the people who are doing,
Mm.
their works. So being critical is something very important. Not taking anything at face value again.
Mm. I think, again, you've already answered this question, but is there an historical figure, an event or era which you feel a personal connection? And I guess what drew you to it?
Well, definitely, it would be Elizabeth I for me. And I think I remember clearly when I was in this, lecture at university, and the lecturer was talking about Elizabeth I ruling on her own for 44 years. And I just thought, this woman is amazing. I just feel there's so much to learn from this woman.
Mm.
And Elizabeth I is far from being perfect, but there's something really, you know, inspiring, I think, about her. Because
I was gonna follow that up with how does your connection kind of influence your perspective as an historian?
it does, like, I always discuss that with my friends who are historians as well. You're never completely objective. You can't be, because you're drawn to a topic for a reason. It resonates within you for whatever your past, whatever you've been through. There's something that I share with Elizabeth I, and I think that's why I'm so drawn to her. They're very personal. So you're never completely kind of objective. At the same time, I think that when you're an academic historian and you write academically, you have to put a distance between your topic and yourself. And it's what I've tried to do in my academic work. Less so with public history books and trade books, because I think it's okay for the audience to have the historian's perspective, and it's the historian's role to grab your attention and put you into the way they see things. And I think that's why it's so interesting to read books, because you go through history books, because you go through the eyes of the historians who wants you to look at something in particular. And I like that. But when you do academic history, it's more being about like almost a scientist. And it's a skill also, I think, to acquire, to put a bit of distance.
You've definitely got to be methodical, aren't you, in the
Yeah,
way
exactly.
you
It's about being
approach every
methodic.
subject.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. There's something very, yeah, methodic, scientific behind it. But in many ways, you're drawn to topics because of your personality, because of your past, because of whatever. Like there's always something. You're never completely objective, I think.
What common misconceptions or myths about a particular historical event or era do you think you'd most like to debunk?
Well, so many. For example, right now, the first one that comes to my mind is probably because I'm going to make videos on her is Mary the First of England. I think Bloody Mary, absolutely not. They're not saying that she hasn't, put to death hundreds of Protestants. But what I find very interesting is like it was what Catholic rulers used to do. She didn't do anything more or anything more outrageous than the French kings, the Spanish kings. And yet she's the only one with a bloody title. And it's actually a Protestant propaganda in Elizabeth I's reign. That really created that. And so I think there's lots to discuss about Mary the First, and it's one of where there are lots of myths and misconceptions to debunk. Definitely, I would say definitely one of them.
And that leads me perfectly onto the next one, which is how can the public better discern reliable historical information from misinformation? Or, as I know you do yourself, you do some of these reviews on TV shows and things like that. So fictional portrayals, how can the public, decide what's right and what's wrong?
It's a very good question. I think, historical, portrayals on screen or, in books, historical fiction is very important to remember they're like doors and windows to the past. It's a way of wanting to know more. But I'll always advise you that if you're interested in a TV show like even The Crown, it's more modern, but Vikings or
Tudors or something like that.
Serpent Queen, whatever you like,
Yeah.
and always go then to the source. And that's why in all my videos I always try to give you a list of books that I think people should read, because there's a better portrayal, there's a better understanding of a historical character or of a historical moment. So definitely watch lots of historical TV shows and movies. But
And I think people take history from, say, watching the Tudors or something like that. They think that everything that's portrayed in front of them is actually fact, when we all know that it's not, because there's artistic license to change the storyline, make it entertaining, and the only interest probably of these TV companies is to get more viewers.
Exactly. That's why, again, it's important to either go back on YouTube and watch videos, history videos, or, there are documentary. You see what I mean? Like, there's like an effort to do research. You do research
Mm.
on all your videos. So to look at that, or then to read the books, I think it's, both also come hand in hand massively.
Right, final question from me, this one, and then we're on to viewers' questions, which are going to be probably far more daunting than anything I've asked you. But what advice would you give to anyone interested in pursuing a career in history or historical research? And how would they kind of go about getting into this field?
Well, it depends on which stage of their life they're in. If you're like, if you're still in high school, I would advise you to do a history degree. If you have done a career and you're not longer happy in your career, maybe look if you could do a master to reconvert yourself. But I think we're going to see in the future more and more people, more and more historians, including myself. I've been thinking about that a lot. Not for now, but in the future, as I said, like where we create mentorships, because I receive lots of emails, lots of messages about helping people to achieve their dreams, to achieve to be historians. And it requires a lot of work because, there are some skills that need to be acquired before being able to do anything. So I think here we will develop like finding a mentor, finding a historian that you like, that could be your mentor, that would be willing to help you um, make that change of career, really, or pursue that passion for history.
It is. I mean, it's a very complicated exercise from start to finish, I think. And for anybody who can see it through, because obviously we're not talking a 1 year course in media. We're talking it's years of research and study, and it's a long old road, isn't it? At the end of the day.
Yeah, but if you love it, if it's something you really want to do,
Oh
then
yeah.
it will be worth it, and it will go very fast as well.
Right. I've now got some really interesting viewers' questions for you. And I can't remember, I've got the names, but I can't remember when they asked these because we've obviously put this off for a little while. Edward, he asked this, well, actually, it's a two-part question from Edward. I think he got a little bit greedy with this one. His question was, do you have any records of Anne of Cleves' ladies in waiting during or after her queenship? And if yes, can you share their experience with her during the said periods?
Okay, unfortunately, personally, I don't work on Anne of Cleves, so my answer is going to be no. But however, Edward, I can recommend you two historians who are doing amazing work on Anne of Cleves. The first one is her Heather Danzy. I hope I'm pronouncing this right, but she's written a lot on Anne of Cleves, and I'm sure you will find very interesting information about ladies in waiting. But also, there's Valerie Schute, who is working on the next biography of Anne of Cleves. I don't know when it will come out, but in the next year or two max. I mean, I know she's been working very hard on this. And again, you might find all the information you want to know about the ladies in waiting that were serving Anne of Cleves and how Anne of Cleves was so influential in at Henry's court, even especially after, I would say, after she was queen.
The second part of his question, and probably you may not be able to answer this, but he did ask, did she stay at Chelsea Manor very often?
I'm not even sure. I think you'll have the answer in this book. We know that she was obviously given Hever Castle, so we know like there's lots of work as well that's doing right now at Hever about the years of Anne of Cleves, but I don't think they have released anything now, so I'm actually not sure.
I mean, it's as difficult as trying to find a gravestone in Westminster Abbey.
Well, I'm sure you will find the answer in the books that I've mentioned. Like, I'm sure Heather Danzy or Valerie Schutte will know about this way more than I do.
Well, I'm sure Edward will be pleased with that, and at least he's got some information to go on now. Another question here from Susanna. She asked, first, again, they just get greedy, these people. Did the way Henry VIII treated Anne Boleyn did the way Henry VIII treated Anne Boleyn the most significant influence on Elizabeth? Never get to, hang on a sec, this don't make it. Did the way Henry VIII treated Anne Boleyn
Yeah.
It was the most significant influence on Elizabeth I never to get married. That's it. Yeah. So yeah. So did the way Henry treated Anne basically stop Elizabeth I never from getting married? Was there influence there to stop her doing that?
I think that we cannot completely, though it's very hard to do psychological work on people who've been dead for, 500 years. But I think we cannot completely dismiss that the death of Anne Boleyn and the fate of other of Henry VIII's wives have impacted, Elizabeth's um, relation to marriage.
Mm.
Having said that, though, I think that it's more complex. I think that the fact that when she was young, she was so much seeking her father's love, which she never truly received, probably because of the way her mother's and her father's, marriage ended. I mean, let's face it, like it's quite awful. It's an awful end. Her father is responsible for the death of her mother. But I think, yes, it must have played a role, but I don't think we'll ever really know. I wish we had a letter of Elizabeth, being explicit about it. So far, I've never seen anything explicit about this. So
And I guess it's a bit like the video I made a while ago, the last letter of Anne Boleyn. There's whether that's a truth or a fake, no one really knows the answer to that one. But Susanna does go on to ask, and you probably already answered this because it's really difficult to answer some of these. Did he ever show any love to her as a father should show a daughter?
I think he tried. I don't think he was really good at it. I think Elizabeth remains a big disappointment for Henry, which quite ironic, because obviously she's one of the greatest English monarchs of all
Mm.
time.
Mm.
So he wanted a male heir, he wanted a son, yet his daughter is the one who's going to rule over 44 years and do great things and show that she was really his true daughter. But I think he did try to show her love. I'm not sure he really succeeded.
Yeah, I don't think he succeeded at all. It's a very difficult, complicated guy, isn't he, Henry VIII? So I don't think we'll ever really know what he was like as a
No,
person.
exactly.
It's just one of those, you just
I think
kind
he
of,
was very selfish. Very, nothing else mattered about for me, his own feelings and his own desires and his own goals. So,
I think it's like we said earlier, I do think that the ladies of history are far more fascinating because men are just men. They've never changed. It's like they're always looking for that next conquest and that could
yeah,
be in conquest can be termed in numerous ways. I'm not just suggesting
yeah,
they're all womanizers, but it's really difficult. But anyway, let's move on because I don't
yeah.
want to keep you too long. I've got a question here from, I think it's Never. He says, he asks, was the execution of Catherine Howard, and this is going back to Elizabeth again, one of the critical reasons Elizabeth never got married?
Again, must have played a part, but I think again it's very hard to know psychologically what she must have felt. Obviously, I think that she was kind of old enough, or old, kind of she was understanding what was happening. Um, did she really understand the ins and outs of what was going on? Probably not. Uh, but she was realizing that her father was definitely changing, wives quite often, and maybe she thought, well, that's a bit in a very dangerous position to be in, really.
Well, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's quite a sad life, Catherine Howard. I mean,
Yeah, I made a video on her. Like
she
yeah.
didn't even have a good upbringing. I mean, she didn't really have an upbringing. If you look
No,
at
it's very sad because I feel like the people who should have protected her failed her
Felder, yeah.
repeatedly.
I've got a question now from Linda, and I think this is the final one actually. If Catherine of Harrogate, if Catherine of Aragon had a surviving son, would there not have been a Protestant Reformation?
That's a very good question. Given that Henry VIII was very close to the Pope, that he was named Defender of the Faith, that he really took a stance against Martin Luther, and that he remained Catholic until the end of his life, like that's something people tend to forget. It doesn't change religion because of the break with Rome. The break with Rome is political, it's not really religious. It just helps people who are, uh, attracted, or let me do that. People who are drawn to Protestant and Reformed ideas, it let them like have this kind of gap to get more Protestant ideas in England. But Henry VIII doesn't change his mind. And you see that especially with his last relationship with Catherine Parr and how she's trying more and more to influence the reign. And she's that close to lose her head as well because of it. Like there's going to be a conspiracy against her, and then she's going to be completely like, Henry VIII, I'll do whatever you want. She learned about the other wives. So I think here, if Catherine of Aragon had had a son, I think it's pretty safe to say that the Reformation would, if it had ever happened in the end, it would have been delayed. It would not have happened with Henry VIII.
Because it was said early doors when the two of them got together that they were really very much in love, and
very much in love and very much Catholic.
Yeah, and the change is like remarkable. It's kind of from the sublime to the absolute ridiculous. The way Henry just kind of veered off on this road somewhere to nowhere, basically.
Well, he really wanted a son. And I think he felt like Catherine was really failing him. The blame was really put on the women at the time. He never reflected that the problem might have been him. And, now we know that it's the sperm that, defined the gender, the sex of the baby. So he was the one to blame, really. No, the women never were there to blame. But for him, it was really a failure on Catherine. I think it's not just that. It's the fact that she kept it's a very tragic story. But, Mary the First was obviously, Princess Mary was going to be born in 1516. But there's lots of miscarriages. There's lots of like stillborn. There's lots of like very unlucky, right? And you can see also the similarities with Anne Boleyn, who's going to experience the same thing once she, after Elizabeth. And I think that in many ways it's Henry, Catherine of Aragon, and Anne Boleyn is Henry VIII. So you could even imagine that maybe they would have been more fertile and more prosperous with another man. I think Henry VIII was extremely toxic.
You think? I know he had a son with Bessie Blount. Would that have made, if that boy had lived any longer, and then he obviously would have still probably had Edward the Sixth, who went on to become the king? Do you think there would have been conflict there between the two of them? Because one obviously illegitimate, one from Jane.
There's always this risk, isn't it? Because we see later on in history, with illegitimate sons who are even recognized or legitimized and who are giving lands and titles, how they can be, a problem for the monarch, and so, depending, honestly, I don't really know, like Henry Fitzroy died, he was 17, so it's very hard to know what he would have actually done, but he was extremely close to his father. He received lots of lands and wealth, and lots of people would have probably seen him as, as a possible heir to the throne. So especially if his factions would have been maybe more Catholic, maybe that would have created a bigger problem for Edward VI. But again, it's a lot of what if here. But how much I love what if.
Yeah, they are what ifs, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, that's all the questions I think today, Estelle. So what I want you to do now is have a bit of a plug and plug your book, plug your channel, and tell us all about Elle History and obviously your books that you've got out and the Fire and Gold and the upcoming one. Tell us all about that.
Okay. So let me just say that's good because we're releasing that video. When are we releasing? The 25th September, right? Yeah.
Early October. No.
September, I think we said 25th September.
No,
you're right. No, 25th of October. Let me check.
I think it's about 11th.
There's something embargoed. Yeah, we said 25th of October. Yeah, it's a Wednesday.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
So that's perfect because that's great because the announcement will be made by my publisher, so I can say it. So yeah, I'm Dr. Estelle Paranque. I've created Elle History. I do videos on Once Upon a Woman, so women history, history police, movies and historical show reviews. But I also do what if history because I love a good what if, like what if things had been different and then, what kind of changes or consequences we would have had. And I do what the L in history, like mysteries, medical mysteries, big historical mysteries. sometimes a bit, weird type of history, which I really love. And obviously, I'm the author of Blood, Fire, and Gold, but more importantly, I've written my next book. It will be out in May 2024, and it is called Thorns, Lust, and Glory, the betrayal of Anne Boleyn. But my book is different because it really focuses on the French betrayal of Anne Boleyn. And when I talk about the French betrayal, is like I look at the first part of the book, looks at Anne in France, and here you dive into Francis I of France court. You look at Louise of Savoy, Claude de France, Marguerite of Angoulême, and you look at the influence they have had. I'm going to do that again. You look at the influence that these women had on Anne Boleyn, and then you move to Anne Boleyn going to England. But when you do it in the book, it's really through French eyes. It's through the French ambassadors, what they're reporting, the relationship with the different French ambassadors, especially Jean du Bellay, who's a huge supporter of Anne Boleyn. And he tried until the end. I think it's chapter 10 or chapter 11, it's called The Impossible Mission. It was very heartbreaking for me to write. Is Jean du Bellay really trying to help? And until the very end. And then you see that the French, are taking to their drama. And the question is, did they betray her or not? So please read the book. Out in May 2024, available for pre-order, and I'll be very grateful for any pre-orders.
I'm sure there'll be people queuing at the doors as we speak, waiting for this publication. It's been fabulous speaking to you today. I'm really kind of honored, I guess, that you've given up some of your time. No, it's not really. I'm just kind of, really glad that you've given up some of your precious time today. I know you're busy with quite a lot of projects on the go at the moment. So thanks so much for everything. And hopefully we could do it again one day.
Thank you so much, Sean, definitely. And thank you for everything you've done for me and my channel. You're such a true supporter of people who want to give YouTube a shot, but also you're such a history lover, and it's a pleasure to talk with you anytime.
All right, thank you. I really hope you enjoyed that insightful look into an historian's career, life, and of course, her passionate views on history. Be sure to follow Dr. Paranque on her channel here on YouTube, Elle History, to stay updated on her latest work. And of course, I'll place a link in the description. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. We couldn't do this without your support and engagement. And if you found this interview as fascinating as myself, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with your fellow history enthusiasts. Remember, history is a treasure trove of knowledge, and the more we explore it, the better we can understand our present and shape our future. So keep seeking knowledge and embracing the lessons from the past. Once again, a big thanks to Estelle and all of you. And until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.